Welcome back. This is episode 98 of the Veterinary Business Video Show. In today's show, we'll hear about some of the factors which influence practice profitability. We'll find out how to deal with negative reviews online, and we'll think about the priorities of life. We'll hear how to plan your management time, ask whether you're a hare or a tortoise as far as marketing is concerned, and I'll offer you my quick business tip for this episode. I'm John Sheridan, and this is the show that helps practice owners, managers and clinicians just like you to build your successful practice into a great business. What are some of the factors which are likely to influence the profitability of veterinary practices in general and the practices in your part of the world in particular? Is it to do with the price of some of your services or the wealth of your customers? Maybe it's linked to how hard you work, how many staff you employ, or your clinical experience and skills. Could it have something to do with your age or even your gender? Or is it simply linked to the economic well-being of your particular marketplace? Here's a clip in which my very good friend Pere Mercador, a veterinarian and business consultant from Spain, and one of the speakers at this year's BSAVA Congress in Birmingham, outlines the results of some recent studies in the United States, Spain, and Portugal.
Hello, I am Pere Mercader and I have been invited to lecture in Besaba. The theme being practice profitability. The key question to answer was why some clinics are much more profitable than others. And what we have done is to review all available scientific evidence on this topic. The conclusion is that even if it's true that there are factors like the gender of the owner of the clinic, the years of experience, the geographic location of the clinic, yes, it is true that all those have an influence on the profitability of the clinic. There are two factors that are very related to management that have a very critical influence on profit. One of them is the level of economic or financial knowledge of the owner of the clinic. And the second one, even more important, is the practical application of that knowledge. The so-called good management practices that were analyzed in the US in the last years and that have been proven to apply not just in the US but in other countries like Spain and Portugal. And the main conclusion being that time spent by veterinarians in improving their level of education and improving the practical application of management in their clinics is time well spent, is profitable time. Thank you.
Now for the website search for this episode. The rapid growth of social media has created a platform that's easily accessible to anyone with internet access. It can follow this, improve customer service, and be a very cost-effective marketing platform for small business owners. It can also provide a ready opportunity for business customers to record their experiences online and to post reviews, good and bad, about the service they've received. Have you or your practice ever received a negative review online? Here's a promotional clip from the WebSmith Group, which might be of some help.
I saw a negative review about your veterinarian clinic online. It was not pretty. Why should I take my dog to your clinic when you treat animals that way? People love their animals, and veterinarians are vulnerable to any kind of negative reviews from people who have an animal that is going through any kind of painful procedure. The problem is, the owners always take it out on the veterinarians. Rarely do they say anything positive online, but they will always say something they perceive as negative. There are three things you can do to get more positive reviews online and reduce the number of negative ones and thereby acquire new patients. 1. Every veterinarian has suffered from some negative review about their practice. You cannot ignore these reviews. Most veterinarians don't know what to do about them, but ignoring them is acting like an ostrich and will do you no good. Number 2, get more positive reviews from your clients, but be careful how you do it. Do not offer them any kind of incentive, as that can get you in trouble. We recommend a program, there's a link below, that will help you with this issue. Number 3, recognize that review sites now have a much greater impact on your Google listings than you realize. This is a big change in Google in just the last few months, and most veterinarians are not aware that this is happening. All three of these recommendations can be handled by one simple program.
Now let's take a look outside the box for this episode. Just for a couple of minutes, sit back in your chair, forget the world about you, and take a look at this short video from the Self-Help Center. Your family might appreciate it. It's about getting the priorities right in your life.
A professor stood before his philosophy class and had some items in front of him. When the class began, he picked up a very large and empty jar and proceeded to fill it with golf balls. He then asked the students if the jar was full. They agreed that it was. The professor then picked up a box of pebbles and poured them into the jar. He shook the jar lightly. The pebbles rolled into the open areas between the golf balls. He then asked the students again if the jar was full. They agreed it was. The professor next picked up a box of sand and poured it into the jar. The sand filled up everything else. He asked once more if the jar was full. The students responded with a unanimous yes. The professor then produced 2 glasses of wine from under the table and poured the entire contents into the jar, effectively filling the empty space between the sand. The students laughed. "Now," said the professor, as the laughter subsided, "I want you to recognize that this jar represents your life. The golf balls are the important things: your family, your children, your health, your friends, and your favorite passions. Things that if everything else was lost and only they remained, your life would still be full. The pebbles are the other things that matter, like your job, your house, your important possessions, and the sand is everything else, the small stuff. If you put the sand into the jar first," he continued, "there is no room for the pebbles or the golf balls. The same goes for life. If you spend all your time and energy on the small stuff, you will never have room for the things that are important to you. Pay attention to the things that are critical to your happiness. Take care of the golf balls first, the things that really matter. Set your priorities. The rest is just sand." One of the students raised her hand and inquired what the wine represented. The professor smiled. "I'm glad you asked. It just goes to show you that no matter how full your life may seem, there's always room for a couple of glasses of wine with a friend."
Now for the 60-second seminar for this episode. In some ways, time is like money. If you control it, you can create a satisfactory and productive working environment. But if not, you could spend much of your working life in an exhausting and depressing cycle and still not achieve your professional, commercial, or personal objectives. There is, however, one big difference between time and money. If you don't spend money today, you can save it till tomorrow. But time not spent effectively today is gone forever. Here are 5 tips to help you plan your management time in the practice. Tip number 1. Write down everything you need to do in the same to-do list on the same tool. It could be a notebook or on your PC, smartphone or tablet. Tip number 2. Review your tasks and prioritize them at the same time each day, maybe first thing in the morning or last thing in the evening of the day before. Tip number 3. Check your list of jobs and appointments for the day and plan what documents, data, other information or tools you need to collect for each of them. Tip number 4. Schedule blocks of time in the day to work on your to-do list. Schedule high priority items early in the day when you're attentive and alert, and when possible schedule similar items all in the same time block. For example, plan to make all outgoing calls in the same hour, or read and respond to emails during 1 or 2 small blocks of time each day. And finally, tip number 5, allow for some flexibility in your schedule. So in an 8-hour day, maybe plan for 6 hours of medium to high priority work so that your plans aren't greatly disrupted if an emergency or crisis comes up. If it's not needed, you can work on something else or give yourself a few minutes of downtime to unwind and reduce stress or to think creatively. Now for my quick business tip for this episode. Now let's switch our thoughts to marketing and ask, what's the best approach? Are you a hare or a tortoise? Do you believe that eye-catching promotions, discounts, deals and other short-term marketing initiatives are the best way to boost your top line, or is the traditional approach To build a long-term bond with your clients, still the best. Here's a clip in which Denise Tumblin offers her advice.
When it comes to marketing, I think slow and steady wins the race every time. You really need to have a plan, a structured plan. And I like to think of it as a 12-month plan where you actually sit down and think strategically about what topics you want to promote throughout the year, the timeline for when you want to put those promotions in place, the platforms, the formats that you want to use. Are you going to do everything online with your website and your Facebook page and your social media? Are you going to use email promotion, direct mail promotion? What formats are you going to use? Of course, you also have to think about budget and how much you want to spend for each of the different topics that you want to promote and the marketing plans or the marketing programs for that particular topic. You have to think about who's going to be responsible for doing it and the time that you're going to set aside for them to do the marketing. And really, first and foremost, what are the results that you're trying to accomplish? All this wonderful plan, if you haven't thought about what are we trying to accomplish, I think your marketing plan will fail without that. So to me, it's slow and steady that wins the race.
So what's my quick business tip? Well, it's this. I'd go with Denise Tumblin. Promoting products and services is an important part of marketing your practice, but it's much more than that. Building long-term relationships with existing clients, finding innovative ways to bring in new ones, and keeping in touch on a regular basis with all of them will continue to be the best strategy in the long term. Well, that's about it for now. I'm John Sheridan, and this is the Veterinary Business Video Show. See you next time.